Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm talking about the use of comparative and superlative adjectives. Before I do so, let me draw your attention to syllables in English, since there is a kind of a relationship between today's lesson and syllables. So briefly speaking, what are syllables in English? Syllables are small groups of sounds that you hear in each word. Each syllable must have a vowel sound. Examples. So I begin with one syllable words: tall, big, and fat. All these words contain only one syllable. Now, example of two syllable words: happy, quiet. These two words contain two syllables, as you can see. Now, an example of three syllable words. I have given you here two examples: expensive, dependent. As you can see, these two words contain 1, 2, 3, three syllables. Four syllable words or more, like continental. The first word contains 1, 2, 3, 4 syllables, and the other word contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anticipated is 5 syllable word. We use the comparative form to compare between two things, animals, places, or people. We usually use than with the comparative adjectives. Let's see an example together. So here I have Henry, Tom, and Joe. If I use the adjective tall, I can say that Henry is taller than Tom. Also, Tom is taller than Joe. If I use the adjective short, I can say that Joe, look at here, Joe is shorter than Tom, and Tom is shorter than Henry. Now, if I consider their ages, I have here, as you can see, Henry is 15, Tom is 12, and Joe is 10 years old. So I can say, using the adjective old, that Henry is older than Tom, and Tom is older than Joe. If you want to use the adjective young, you can say Joe is younger than Tom and Tom is younger than Henry. And we use the superlative form to compare one person, thing, or an animal or a place with the entire group or the whole group. In other words, we use the superlative when the comparison is taken to the highest degree. For example, using the same characters, Joe is 10 years old, Tom is 12, and Henry is 15. So if I want to compare Henry to all the others in the same group, I say Henry is the oldest boy. So as you can see here, I do not compare two people here as I do with the comparative form, but I compare one person, who is Henry, to all the others in the same group. So I use the superlative form. Another example. I have here three roads. Road A, which is 30 kilometers, Road B, 50 kilometers, and Road C is 70 kilometers. So if I want to compare Road C to all the other roads in this category, I say Road C is the longest of all the other roads. Now let's talk about the form of both comparative and superlative. How can we form them? How can we get the form of comparative and superlative? And what's the rule? So in this table, I'm going to talk about three major categories of adjectives: one syllable adjective, two syllable adjectives, and three or more syllable adjectives. So let me begin with the first category of adjectives: one syllable adjectives. So as you can see here, one syllable adjectives. We have, or I give you 4 examples of adjectives. Clear becomes clearer in the comparative form. Dark, darker than. Tall, taller than. Short, shorter than. So what's the rule here? What do we add? We add ER to the end of the adjective to get the comparative form. Now we move on to the superlative. Clear becomes the clearest, dark, the darkest, the tallest, and the shortest. What we do, we add est to the end of the adjective. and the at the beginning of each adjective. Now, one syllable adjective ending with E. Of course, if the adjective is already ends with E, we add just R. Wise, wiser, than. Simple, simpler than. The same thing with the superlative. Normally, as I told you before, that we add est to the end of the adjective, but here, since the E is already exists in the adjective, we add just st, the wisest, the simplest. Now, adjectives ending with one vowel and one consonant, like thin, hot, big and fat. What we do, we double the last consonant and then we add er. So thin becomes thinner in the comparative, thinner than. Hot, hotter with double T, er, hotter than. Big, bigger with double G, than. Fatter with double T, fatter than. The same thing with the superlative. We double the last consonant and we add est to get the superlative. So thin, the thinnest. Hot, the hottest. Big, the biggest. Fat, the fattest. Now I'm here talking about two-syllable adjectives. I talk about these two groups. Two-syllable adjectives ending in Y. What we do? For example, we have busy, happy, pretty. So we omit the Y, we change it into I, as you can see here, and then we add er plus than. Busy becomes busier in the comparative, busier than. Happy, happier than. Pretty, prettier than. And in the superlative, the busiest, the happiest, the prettiest. Now, two-syllable adjectives not ending in Y. For example, careful, boring, famous, helpful. We add more before the adjective plus than. More careful than, more boring than, more famous than, more helpful than. Now the superlative. We add the most before the adjective to get the most careful, the most boring, the most famous, the most helpful. Now the last category of adjectives. Three or more syllable adjectives like comfortable, expensive, popular. So the adjective here is preceded with the word more and followed by than. More comfortable than, more expensive than, more popular than. And the superlative, the most comfortable, the most expensive, the most popular. The last thing in this table is that irregular adjectives, adjectives that do not follow the rule, they change. For example, the adjective good becomes better in the comparative and the best in the superlative. Bad, worse as the comparative form and the worst as the superlative form. Much or many get more as the comparative form and the most as the superlative form. Far, farther or further. And the superlative, the farthest, the furthest. Now in this table, let me talk about two-syllable adjectives that follow two rules. So these adjectives can take in the comparative form er at the end or more plus adjective. The same thing in the superlative form, we can add est to the adjective or they can simply take the most at the beginning of the adjective. So as examples, clever can get the comparative form cleverer than or more clever than. In the superlative form, we can say the cleverest or the most clever, so both of them are correct. Gentle, gentler than or more gentle than. In the superlative form, we can say the gentlest or the most gentle. Friendly, friendlier than or more friendly than. In the superlative form, the friendliest or the most friendly. The same thing with the adjective quiet, simple and narrow. Now, just to practice what we have seen in the lesson, let me give you some examples using both comparative and superlative adjectives. So let's begin with comparative adjectives. James is wiser than his brother. That blue carpet is simpler than the red one. Max is more careful than James. Jill is more thoughtful than her sister. The traffic in London is bad, but the traffic in Rome is worse. Superlative. Jack is the most careful of all taxi drivers. She is the tallest of all her classmates. It's the most expensive ring I've ever seen. Susan is the best student of all. If you want to say, "This gave me a lot of joy today," you can simply say, "My day is made."